Hey, welcome back to Appalachian Expose, the franchise Shane Douglas. I'm really excited today because I got one of my good old friends with me here, known him since the 1980s, I believe, early 90s. Needs no introduction. Everybody knows Luke Williams, one of the Bushwhackers, one of the sheep herders. Thank you for being here today.
Great to be here, Shane, and let's get on with the show.
Yeah, let's do this. I always tell everybody, these are just like the conversations we have in the cars when we first meet and stuff. Who trains you, that kind of thing. So let's go back to the beginning for you, from New Zealand.
Yep.
In New Zealand at that time, how prevalent or predominant was professional wrestling?
Well, it wasn't. You know what? There was one promotion in Wellington, which was the capital of New Zealand. There was one in Auckland, and that had only when they had someone from overseas come into the country, and at that time they would only come into the country for a month or 2 months, or a month at a time, and they'd work a couple of shows a week, one in Wellington, then one in Auckland, then they'd come back the next week for the return match, and maybe they'd go. Someone would stay for a month and that, but there wasn't. The local promotion would run without an overseas guy maybe 3 times a year. You know what I mean? Just the local talent and that. Up in Auckland, which was the biggest city but not the capital, you know, the guy was running, I think, once every 6 weeks, and that he'd run a show in the what's it called now? The RCA, or what is it called? The old rec buildings, you know.
Oh, the YMCA?
YMCA. Anyhow, that was it and that. But it was non-existent. And we didn't have television in New Zealand till '68. And the television used to come on at 3 and go off at 8 o'clock at night.
Wow.
So, you know, and there was only one station for a long, long time. So, you know, there was no wrestling on television. When it did start, they had the Wide World of Sport, which was well known around the world. It was a 2-hour show, and it used to have about 5 or 10 minutes of wrestling on it from Great Britain. But there was no wrestling in New Zealand and that. So getting back to my start, and that I'd never seen any wrestling in my life. I didn't know it even existed, and that when I started, or when I got hooked up in it. And it was a strange thing, and that. Yeah, and you know, it was my next door neighbor. Do you want to get to the start? Yeah. My next door neighbor was a bodybuilder.
Okay.
He'd moved down from a little town called Hara and down into Lower Hartland, Wellington, a suburb of Wellington, the capital, and he trained on the weights and a bodybuilder, and he went into a show, a Mr. New Zealand show, and the judge was an ex-Mr. New Zealand in 1950. We're going back in time here, guys. This is a time warp. Yeah, and he was a Mr. New Zealand in 1950. And then my next door neighbour came second in the show, or third. I'm not sure, somewhere around like that. And the judge said afterwards, "Would you like to make some money with that body?" And my next door neighbour was 225, 230 at the time. And he says, well, going back to New Zealand, it was 16 stone. 16 stone, and I think it was 224.
Yeah.
And then anyhow, 230, 16 stone, 6 pounds. And then he said, "You'll make some money." And my friend said, "How?" He says, "Wrestling." And then he says, "Come into the gym." Now, the gym where he trained was in Wellington, and we lived in Lower Hutt. It was about 8 miles away, or 8 miles away, and that. Now, this gym was like the gym in the first Rocky movies.
Yeah.
You know, in the first Rocky movies, the old steam pipe running, had a steam room, all that, and there was two. You can't even call them machines. 2 racks, a squat rack and a bench press rack, and all the kettlebells were lying around the floor. There was no rack for them. People would use them and just leave them where there was. There's not many mirrors around, but over one side of the gym, there was 2 rings. Now this gym was called Coolman's Gym. Coolman's Gym was noted throughout the British Empire. When you come down under to New Zealand and Australia, this is where all the Commonwealth, or the British Commonwealth, people trained. and it had a lot of champions. It had a lot of boxing champions and amateur wrestling champions there. Like, I don't know whether you know, the Commonwealth Games, Shane, is a British spin-off of the Olympic Games.
Right,
yeah, Commonwealth, or they used to call it the Empire Games or the Commonwealth Games, right? Yeah. Anyhow, this is the gym that had it on there. Now, the rings were this far off the floor, a foot off the floor. They were fucking hard. The floor of the gym was as hard as the floor we're sitting in now. Boy, this bloody guy's got a hard floor in this place.
Yeah.
And then I hate to stand you here. Anyhow, the floor was like that, and the ring was 20 by 20. Huge. That was the regulation in the boxing, and the wrestling, 20 by 20 inside the ropes. Oof. From rope to rope, and there was 4 ropes.
So
being a boxing ring.
Let me interject here for the fans out there watching. Most wrestling rings are 18 foot. 20 foot is the bigger ring. That throws your timing off considerably. The 18-foot ring is usually a 3-step.
Well, what was timing then?
You're right.
And going back in 1961 when I started going there, anyhow, my neighbor went in and started going in there and training. 6 months later, he said to me, the next door neighbor, the skinny kid next door, 170 wet. Yeah. That was me. And he says to me, do you want to come to the gym with me? And I start coming to the gym. So I started, this was 1961, started going to the gym with him. You know,
to weightlift, bodylift build.
And no, he says, come in to go to the gym here to do a bit of weightlifting. And we could push around, I'll push around the mat with you, show you a few things, you know what I mean? Because he'd been there for 6 months with the I forgot to tell you, the guy too, who was Mr. New Zealand, he was actually the wrestling promoter in the capital city.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. So that's when he asked him, you want to make some money with your body?
Right.
And then he didn't know that he was a wrestling promoter. My partner never seen any wrestling either.
Right.
You know, he amateur wrestling.
When it was on the Wide World of Sports, for that 10, 12-minute segment, did you catch that at all?
No, we didn't have television to 68.
Wow.
So, and that Wide World of Sport didn't start till 70.
Oh, okay.
So I started going to the gym with them. And then there was a house show in Wellington. It was at Pat O'Connor. Man, this is it. Pat O'Connor came home. This was 62.
Oh, was he
He's a Kiwi.
I didn't know that.
Now, Pat O'Connor was the world NWA champion who drew the biggest house in North America against Nature Boy, Buddy Rogers, in 1961. And I think it was in Chicago and Detroit. They drew 40,000.
Yeah, I think that was Chicago, yes.
Chicago and that. Pat O'Connor came home and that in 62 for a couple of shows and that, which was in Wellington and Palmerston North. And that was the first time I ever went to a wrestling show because my next door neighbor was on the card. But now we've jumped now from 61 to 62. Now this gym I'm telling you about, to the old water, the steam room there, and the pipes rattle and everything, it was a real, like in the first Rocky movie, a real gym like that, hardcore. Hardcore. And the wrestlers, the guys I pushed around were light heavyweights, cauliflower ears, they were semi-pro. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Cauliflower ears, the nose was over here, the ears were fucking like this, and hey, you knew they'd been in some kind of sport. Right. The only way you get a face like that is through rugby. If you're a forward in rugby, which is New Zealand's NFL without any pads, or amateur wrestling.
Yes.
You know, maybe a few boxers. Anyhow, so my first show was I went to see this show with my neighbor working on in a tag match.
So you actually worked this first show?
No. I was the first time I ever went and saw wrestling. I never seen a wrestling magazine or nothing.
Right.
You know what I mean? There was a few magazines I heard were out in the shops, wrestling magazines.
Right.
Okay. The second show I went to was in Palmerston North, and I went up there. My neighbour said, "You want to come to Palmerston North?" It was 100 miles away, a couple of hours, 2-lane roads. You know,
Yes.
in New Zealand. You know, we didn't have highways in New Zealand. What's a bloody highway?
Right.
A motorway. You didn't have those sort of things. Anyhow, so I went to Palmerston North, which is 100 miles away, and I'm out in the back in the dressing room, and the guy for the second match or first match didn't arrive. Next minute, I get a bloody a tank top and a pair of boots. Well, hey kid, what size shoe do you wear? And I said blah blah blah. Next minute, a fucking pair of boots come flying at me. And then
no training at this point.
Yeah. I've been in the gym,
just rolling around.
You know, on the mat training with the guy. Yeah. You know, we're British style.
Yes.
I done ground wrestling. You know, hammerlock, wrist lock.
Right.
You know, down the hammerlock to the top wrist lock, and then down on the ground, hammerlock on the ground, hit back, reverse headlock, and you know, take over from a headlock and all that. I learned how to do ground chain wrestling.
Sure. Yes.
And next minute I'm in the ring. Now don't ask me, Shane, how that match was. It was a blur.
Yeah.
But that was my first match in the ring in 1962.
When you're going through the curtain, the door to go to the ring, having had no experience of having done this before, were you scared shitless? Were you?
I can't remember. I had to be. I had to be scared. Go to the ring and work with this guy.
Yeah.
I can. Now I pushed around with the guy in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
I pushed around in Coolman's gym. I pushed around with the guy quite a few times because he was about 180, you know, and I was 170.
Yeah.
To be buggy with arms, you know, 5'10", 5'11", buggy, that skinny, fucking frail. Thinking I had a pair of jeans on so I wouldn't see the 2 pieces of spaghetti hanging from my waist. And as Roddy Piper would say, cover those buggy whips up.
Yeah.
You know, my legs.
Oh, yeah.
If you know what a buggy whip is, paces or trotting horse, you know, the guy sitting back in the buggy, he's got that long whip and he whips the horses to go. Well, that's a buggy whip. Well, that's how my legs work. The thickness of that, and they're not any bigger today. Anyhow,
quick interjection here. How many, were they drawing decent houses at that time?
They were full because they never had wrestling.
Yeah.
Once, you know, that town must really had 2 shows a year.
Yeah.
Palmerston North.
So packed out.
Yeah, packed out. You know, packed out house in a town like that, 2,500.
Yes.
2,500. And so that was my first match in the business.
God, I'd have been terrified.
And after that, it just came one after then, bling, bling, bling. You know, every time the guy brought someone to the country, I'd be working. And every show was in the capital, I'd be working. And my name at that time was Ted Williams. You know, I was known as Teddy Williams in Wellington.
Yeah.
And hence Luke Williams, because when I first come to North America, they said, we've already got a Ted Williams here in sport,
Baseball, yeah.
who was
a
baseball player.
Yeah.
So I was changed to Luke Williams. They said it's more of a farm name, you know, because Luke is what they call the dog, you know, sheepdog.
Yeah.
Hey, Luke, come here, boy. Anyhow, so that was the start of my in the business, and I was working here. And they changed me because I had long hair, and once I got into the swinger thing, I dyed it blonde, and I was called Gorgeous Teddy Williams. Gorgeous Teddy Williams. So then straight away, I started buying magazines, and I saw this Gorgeous George guy.
Right.
And in Australia too, there was a guy called Murphy the Surfy, who'd copied. He'd come from England, and he'd copied Adrian Street and Gorgeous George and that. So I had long hair, and I'd use bobby pins and all that in my hair, going to the ring and the mirror and that, and then by 2 years later, a year and a half, 2 years later, I was I had a valet, a male. I had a female valet first, then a male valet, and then they'd, you know, have the mirror and the perfume bottle with a big bubble at the end.
Sure.
You hold the bottle in, you squeeze it, and then come in the corner. I was doing the gorgeous George thing. I got onto that gimmick straight away. I don't know how I got into it, but I saw how gimmicks worked, and that helped to get heat.
Oh yeah,
sure. You got heat, especially when I had the female. I had a female dressed up like a playboy, you know, in like a bunny, like that. And she used to lead me to the ring and spring me going to the ring, and I would slap her and work and slap and that. And I'd have. She was beautiful and that, and I'd have heat because I was treating her like shit.
Right.
I realized how much heat I could get by just not even starting working with the opponent. You know what I mean? And it's that.
Well, like we said last night, it's a lot easier. Not that it's easy being healed, but that it's a lot easier interacting with the crowd because I think anybody can make the crowd dislike them, but to make the crowd love you is, I think, a lot higher bench.
Yes. Anyhow, 1965. You know, the Vietnam War was going. What year did that start?
Late 50s we started sending advisors. But
and it went to in the 70s, right?
In the 70s.
Now, over Vietnam, right above Australia is Singapore. And in Singapore, you go up into at that time it was called Asia and Malaya. Now it's called Malaysia. But it was Asia and Malaya. And then up on top of that, to the right, is Vietnam. And then now all the Americans on R&R, Rest and Recreation, were coming down to Australia and that for Rest and Recreation. You know, when they got off. You know, and these kids, and the kids in that war were thrown in 18 years up. It was sad.
Right.
And it's sad. And you know, being over there in that war for 6 months, they would come down for Rest and Recreation to Australia with $1,000 that they'd saved over 6 months to party.
Right.
And you know, Vietnam was full of drugs. You've seen all the movies and that, the Vietnam Wars, they're all high and all that sort of stuff. Anyhow, Australia's swear words, is that okay? I'm swearing now and again, is that okay?
Oh, sure, yes.
Yeah, Australia had opened up for Vietnam. All these kids come from Australia, from Vietnam. And the King's Cross in Sydney was notorious. It was, you know, it was normal. Everything would close at midnight. All of a sudden, everything was going 24/7 because everyone was coming in from there, from Vietnam. And I'm talking about, they were coming in hordes. And that down to Australia, everything was running 24/7. And I'm talking about drugs, prostitution, the city bars, everything. It was happening. And the King's Cross at the end is Bondi Beach, down the end of the bottom of that. Bondi Beach is the new beach in Australia. So the Americans loved it down there. Hence, Jim Barnett, who was an American promoter from the 50s, late 50s onwards, and owned WCW, World Championship Wrestling.
In Australia.
He came down to Australia in '65. He bought out the roller derby and bought WCW, World Championship Wrestling, to Australia.
And what year was that?
'65.
Okay.
He bought the announcer, Lord Ethel Latham, a former wrestler, 6 foot, say 5, and that tall lead, who became a commentator, you know, a manager and a commentator. He brought him down as for the VOs. He got television. Now Australia had 3 channels at the time. Now Australia's landmass, for you people out there that doesn't know much about geography, Australia's landmass is as big as Canada and US together. Whereas US got...
And almost no population on the interior.
Now he's getting right there, Shane. You know, you get jumping ahead of me, mate, but I know you're an ex-teacher, so you know all this. Population over here was 300 million at the time. I know it's 400 million now, but 300 million, and Australia's population was 30 million.
Wow.
And that in the same land mass, because it's all around the edges, you know. And the northern parts are so hot up there, but around the edges, around here, Perth on one side, and Sydney and Melbourne on the other. Now that cross that is just like going from Washington over to LA. You know, that's the width of Australia, that island. It's the biggest continent in the world as an island.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful country.
Yeah. Unless you go out the outback.
Yes.
Desert.
Yeah.
Anyhow, Jim Barnett came down with WCW, and all of a sudden, you know, before that it was club wrestling, and return service leagues, RSL clubs everywhere. Return service league from World War II and all that. They'd have a room in those RSL clubs that held 1,000, 1,500, and when they run boxing and wrestling, you know what I mean? And it was British style, you know, a lot of ground wrestling, you know, mat wrestling.
Right.
All of a sudden, Jim Barnett brings in American style wrestling, and he brings in the heavy hitters, and that WCW was born there. And where I was going with this, I went over there the first time in about '67 to Australia to work for Jim Barnett, and all of a sudden, he said, gorgeous Teddy Williams is no good. All of a sudden, my name was changed to Sweet William. This might have been 1966. So the new career now was Sweet William. Now, I'm going to bring up the names of guys that were over there at the time. The first big heel he brought over there, who blew the place wide open, is Killer Kowalski, who you knew.
Yes.
Now, the big stars and baby faces, he brought over right from Pittsburgh at 6'4", 6'5". Dominic DeNucci.
Yes,
And Shane knows Dominic DeNucci. That's why he's such a bad wrestler. He was trained by him.
That's what everybody says, right?
No, Dominic, a beautiful guy. God bless him.
Yes, sir.
God bless him. Moving on in my career, I worked with him in '72. And I worked with him in Australia doing jobs. We were brought over to do jobs for the Americans, 3 to 5 minutes, you know what I mean? But we were making nothing in New Zealand, and all of a sudden I'd go to Australia, you know, we were making £5 a match or something like that, £5. And that, because it was pound shilling and some pence at the day, all of a sudden I made £5 would be about $10. You know what I mean? A match. And all of a sudden, I'm making $250 a week in Australia.
Wow. So that's big time.
I'm big time. He's paying the Americans, of course, 1,000. You know, and 1,000 was big money in the '60s.
Yes.
Now, Dominic DeNucci, Mario Milano, Buddy Austin, Brute Barnard, Skull Murphy. That was the tag team. The Jap Tanaka and Fuji, Walter Von Erich and Fritz Von Erich. You look at, I'm talking about, these are all heavy hitters. These are not high spot wrestlers running to the ropes and doing all that sort of stuff. These are punch, kick, and kill, and grab a chin lock or a hammerlock, you know, chokehold. And that these guys never ran to the ropes and did all those spots. It was a different heavy things. Now they're all the bad guys. The baby faces were at that time were, as I said, was Spiros Arion and is the Golden Greek. Spiros Arion, Mario Milano, Dominic DeNucci. Australia is full of Greeks and Italians. And then Spiros Arion, he was a Golden Greek. He came in and worked in Madison Square Gardens and sold out that. He worked around the world. big Greek guy, 6 foot, how tall was he?
He was tall guy, 6'5",
you know, Dominic, 6'4", 6'5". Yeah, Mario was a bit shorter, 6'2". You know what I mean?
And to jump in for just a second, just to reiterate to the fans, all of those guys back then in the business, they were all salty. I mean, they could all go. They
yes.
Put your head up your rear end. You know, play around.
Yeah. You fucking badmouth that business.
Yeah.
Your head be stuck up your ass if they could be, if you're that flexible.
Yes.
Yeah. And the Cowboys. The cowboy walked around the ring, terrible worker in the ring, but he had a canter around the ring and he had a punch. I was just trying to think that. Oh, well done, cowboy.
Bill Watts?
No, not Bill. Fucking, just a tall fucking guy.
And I'm curious if it's the same. Dominic, you know, we talk quite often about Australia because I took him over with me a couple of years ago. And he talked about a young guy, 20-something, that came in, real big guy, cowboy, and he died before the first show. Were you there during that?
No.
He showed me a picture of the guy, and like 24 years old, he came over and, you know, flew in and had a couple days before the first match, and the night before, in the morning, Jim Barnett can't find him, so Dominic calls the hotel. Dominic's in the same hotel. Dominic gets the management, goes up. The guy had died of drugs.
Yeah, okay. The Texas Tavern was owned by an American. That's where all the boys stayed. Barnett put all the boys up in Sydney, in King's Cross.
Yeah.
The top of the cross.
Right.
King's Cross. You could look out your bedroom window and see the hookers change at 8 o'clock in the morning. Fresh ones come out, the old ones go in. They did shift the hookers all night. The R&R were there, you know.
Yeah.
The troops were there from Vietnam.
Right.
And the strip was strip clubs, bars. There was bands playing in bars at breakfast time, you know, and restaurants, and the hotel restaurants. And that for breakfast, 7 o'clock in the morning, there'd be a band, you know, a laid-back band playing, you know, and the heavy band would be playing during the night. And that's how the King's Cross was, that's how it rolled back then. It was wild and woolly.
Yes.
And that, anyhow, and all the heels are hot and heavy. And I don't want to get into how they popped the territory, but he bought Killer Kowalski, and Killer's the one that popped the territory with the claw.
And that was right after, if I'm not mistaken, he had the match with Eric Yukon and got his ear ripped off.
Yes,
right?
Yukon Eric.
Yeah, so they had
in Canada, and he came down to Australia, and then the angle wasn't with, I'm going to explain the angle. The angle wasn't with any wrestler. The angle was, there was only 3 television stations in Australia, maybe 2 at that time, 3. And a place as big as North America.
Right.
And there was 1 talk show, or maybe 2. The main talk show was going nationwide. It was those days there was no satellite, no bicycle. It was played in Sydney, and then originally, or Melbourne, and then it would go out a week later to all the channels around the country.
Yeah.
You know, and the country was only halfway up. It's an island like this, and halfway up on either side, because there's nothing up here except where there's a few places right below Singapore, and that. But all the main action is around here and around the bottom on the coast. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you know, to a couple of 100 miles inland, and the rest is all desert.
Right.
You know, the outback. Where the Aborigines roamed, the nomad tribe, they just didn't have any certain home, they just roamed and camped when they wanted for 4 months, you know, and then moved on. Anyhow, brings Killer Kowalski here, brings him on television. Now he's got an American commentator, it's a complete American show. The voiceovers, everything is American.
Mm.
And he bought the role to be out. It's on prime time on Saturday morning.
Wow. So he's got the TV show now, he's got the venue.
Yeah, he's got all the
wrestlers.
He's got the wrestlers. And I told you the guys he bought in hot, heavy hitters. Mm. So he puts Killer Kowalski on the talk show with a sunny host, which has seen over the whole country.
Sure.
So now it's like the guys are retired now. Not David Letterman. Before that, Johnny Carson. You know, guys like that. The names that big.
Yes, yeah.
Big name,
Right.
and that he was like that, and they talked and that, and blah blah blah. And of course, you told about Madison Square Garden. I wasn't there, but this is third party.
Right.
This is third party BS. No, this is facts. I'm talking, not bullshit. And talked, and he says, now we heard that you have a move that you win all your matches with. And Wally said, Wally is Walter Kowalski. So, and Walter had a body like, you can't, in the 60s, Wally's body's 6'5". It was tapered like this.
Yes.
He'd been selling out Madison Square Garden in the 50s and 60s. Big time, 70s. He was hot.
Yes.
Canadian, and wide shoulders tapered, and he had that nose and that thin jaw with that chin coming out. You know, the voice, Wally's voice and that. And he says, yeah, the claw.
Yes.
Now, when we talk about the claw, we think of the claw going on the head. Wally's claw was on the stomach.
Yeah.
And they started talking about it, and the guy said, fuck it, BS. You know, it's all BS. And Wally says, it's BS. Could you just lay down or come over here and that? And he asked that, and Wally put the claw on his stomach and started squeezing. He held his hand in and started squeezing and working it. And slowly that guy started fading and he went down. Now the show was videoed. This was done about a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes into the show. The rest of the show was the ambulance coming to the studio. Fucking guy put into the ambulance.
Yes.
The camera's following the ambulance to the hospital. The guy's admitted to the hospital. Now that was the whole show.
Right, right.
And now that
and
guy
you know, everybody in Australia had to be buzzing about that.
Yes. They'd seen American wrestling before.
Right.
You know what I mean?
This huge guy
the nightclubs, the RSL clubs didn't have television.
Right.
You know what I mean? You go and you see amateur, we'd see British style wrestling. That was mat wrestling, right? This is a big buzz, a big buzz, and that. Now the guy had 2 days off, and had a guy come in. The third day he came back, and he never mentioned anything about that. Never mentioned it, but he was there, and all of a sudden now and again he'd turn and grab his stomach, and then he'd bend over to get something, and like that, and he'd keep talking, and he was still selling it for about 3 days or 4 days later, 5 days.
Yes.
He sold that stomach, but it was never mentioned again. But the buzz was on.
Oh, of course.
And that's it. And then, of course, he was put with the main baby face had been put over there for the month, 6 weeks, and that's how the whole system started.
Yeah.
And the arenas started getting full.
Right. Now, were you aware, I just learned this 5, 6 years ago myself. Of course I knew Jim Barnett very well, because of Dominic. But when I first got my break in UWF with Bill Watts, he was there. And, so Dominic said, make sure you get to know this guy, that kind of thing. But I had just learned 5, 6 years ago that...
What's that, my boy?
Yes, yes. The first time he saw me, he came around the corner and went, my God, he's beautiful.
Yeah, that's it.
But boy, he knew his stuff.
And you're dead right. This was the promoter that was running from those days that we didn't have satellite, and there was coast to east coast to west coast. He had pieces of territory. Partners were right across the country, and he was bicycling his tapes right across the country. Yeah. He knew promotion.
Modern wrestling in the 60s.
Yeah.
What wrestling is today is built on the things that...
Yeah, and Jim Barnett was one of the... He was he'd taken over from NWA, he was never the president, maybe the vice president of NWA, but he'd taken over. He was a big part of American wrestling.
Oh, yeah, big time. But did you know that he had been a psychology professor, I think at the University of Chicago,
Yeah.
So, you know, translate that to our business, and we,
Yeah.
you know, talk about how in the old school everything was a story, the psychology of the
Yes.
story being told. And having been a psychologist, I'm sure, like the episode you describe on the talk show, he would know exactly how that would play out in the masses.
Yes.
And create the buzz. So, yeah, but I'm sorry, I just want to interject that.
Yeah. But he knew, and you know, and he was always around top talent. Now, he picked up two guys who had been selling out as teenagers, Madison Square Garden. Curtis Iaukea.
Yes.
Prince Curtis Iaukea, who turned out to be King Curtis.
Mm-hmm.
And that he was, and Mark Lewin. Lewin was a brother. He had another brother who wore a mask, Don Curtis,
Yep.
in the Madison Square Gardens. Mark was the younger brother, and he brought Mark and King over there. King was the heel, and Mark was the babyface. Mark was the booker, but King was the main babyface.
Yes.
King was a big Hawaiian guy. His head, guys, look up King Curtis' interview. He's 350 pounds, one of the best interviews ever.
Yes.
And that Curtis, you know, his work was solid. He didn't do much in the ring, but the people hated him. You know what I mean? He worked all the time in the ring. He kept moving, but he didn't have an array of moves. You know what I mean?
Right.
He was King Curtis.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Oh, brother!
Yeah.
You know, anyhow, and you've got Jim Barnett, and they're telling you Jim Barnett was a promoter who was gay.
Yeah.
And but so smart to the business. And he'd worked,
Smart.
Ted Turner, he was the one that got Ted Turner to put the wrestling up on the satellite.
Oh, yeah.
It was Jim Barnett. He lived in Turner Towers in Atlanta.
Yep.
And he worked for NWA office in the background, you know, later on in life, and he worked for Vince. He was very good friends with Vince Senior,
Right.
but he actually worked for Vince Jr. in the office too.
Yes.
And of course for Crockett Senior, when Jimmy Crockett Senior died and Junior took over, he actually worked in the background for that office too.
Right.
You know, sort of guiding the ship because he was around the both dads.
Yeah. Well, in those early years of my career, he was always involved in UWF, NWA, later in WWF.
Yeah.
He was always there somewhere. The first day I met him, to give the fans at home an idea of just how brilliant this guy was and how well connected. The first day I meet him, we go into his office and sit down and we're talking, and he's got a wall full of pictures. Now, being a political scientist, like I'm one of those guys that likes that stuff, I spot two pictures of him sitting 2 seats behind the President of the United States at the inauguration.
Yeah.
At Nixon's, Nixon Carter's and Reagan's. He's sitting this close to the President of the United States on the inauguration stage.
Oh, Ronald, my boy.
Right. So you see a picture like that and you realize if you're even on that stand, but you're sitting that close to the president, you're somebody, right?
Yeah.
You're well connected.
Yeah.
And Jim was.
Jim was well connected. And this is how connected he was with the world too. Yeah. Down Australia is a long way down. You know, for me to come from Florida to go home today is 25 hours.
Yeah.
Now, to go in the 60s, go from US, wherever you lived in US, you had to go to LA or Frisco. From Frisco, you would go to Hawaii. From Hawaii, you go to Nadi, Fiji. And then you go to either Sydney or what part of Australia, where you go to New Zealand. And it was to go to New Zealand was a 35-hour trip. So in Australia, it's 2 hours away from New Zealand. Coming back, so it's 2 hours shorter. You know what I mean? But the layovers. So all those Americans coming down to Australia, Jim made sure he was paying them to their fare down, and he'd take them for 3-6 months, but he would like everyone to be there for 6 months. Time to get them, months to get them over.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And then the rest, or 6 weeks, and then the rest to make money off them. So he had to keep the boys happy there. Now let me tell you how he kept them happy. We flew everywhere in Australia. You'd be based in Sydney. You had one road trip, which was close about an hour away, and then the rest of them you're on a plane.
Right.
And every town you arrive to, the girl. Now this was a hot thing. You were superstars, movie actors, whatever.
Right.
You arrive in the town, the woman will be at the airport. You know what I mean? The fan, and they pick you up in their car. Unless you get a taxi, the Hills had to get taxis.
Yeah.
And that, but they take you to the show, take you to your hotel, leave you there. Then they bring you food to your room. If you're a babyface,
Yeah.
I wasn't. And that now. When you come to the meeting, every Sunday in Melbourne we have a meeting, and he'd sit on a trainer's bench, or massage bench, and you'd be a locker room, a sports locker room, where you got the benches either side, and then the lockers behind you, the middle lockers behind you, and you got the long benches. We'd be sitting there, and then he'd only have the overseas boys in this room, not all the job boys, and we'd be coming from New Zealand. He let us come in. We were sort of with the overseas boys, even though we were the job boys too. And he would go around to each of the boy, and he would know what girl they were seeing in towns. He knew the name of the girl. He knew, how's Sue in Melbourne, Bob? And then, they bring up another guy, Perth, how's Helen of Perth, Bill? You know what I mean? I see she's been cooking up and taking care of you.
Sure.
He knew all that. Whoever's giving them the feed, he knew. And then, of course, he made sure if they smoked weed or they needed speed or anything like that,
right.
He made sure Big Bad John was the man. He would supply all the boys, because he'd get all the stuff on the cross, because all the servicemen coming for R&R,
right.
and King's Cross, there was dealers everywhere. So he'd make sure that Big Bad John made sure that all the boys, well, he was the dealer, for the hash, the smoke, the pills, everything. And of course, at the end of the thing, Jim would say, "Oh, John, do you have my bennies?" Benadryl was a speed pill.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
He would be taking bennies,
wow.
Jim, the dapper.
Yeah.
And he'd always have tailor-made suits on with a handkerchief sitting there with JB, the cufflinks with JB, everything. Jim Barnett,
yes.
tailor-made,
Oh,
everything. This is my first overseas tour, and then I'm sitting in the dressing room there, and I see what's going on. Now, I'd never thrown a punch. In New Zealand, the police were the commission, and that you couldn't throw a punch or kick anybody. You could do a forearm or an uppercut, forearm, the British ones, and you could do a knee drop or a leg drop, or a knee drop. You couldn't use a bloody kick anyone with your foot, or you couldn't punch.
Right.
When we went to Australia, me and Bob went to Butcher's name is Bob, we went to Australia, and that's where we had to pick that up straight away.
Right.
We learned how to punch and kick.
Now, I don't want to get off track here. When did you meet Bob Butch?
He came to our promotion. He was still playing rugby. He came and he broke in another promotion, which was what you call an outlaw. The guy would only run. He was a self-trained wrestler, and he trained people. So you know how much they knew.
Yeah.
And Butch came. Butch sort of picked it up, and Bob Butch had won Mr. Chest in the YMCA. Butch, back in the old, you won't believe this, but back in those days, Butch had that old chest, the body like Bruno had, but thicker, and you go like that, you could sort of glass on his pecs when he went like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. He had that sort of body in about 19-inch arms, and that thick, very thick arms, and that chest, because he had a gym in his home, and he did a lot of, to pull that chest out like that, he did a lot of pullovers, straight arm pullovers, to pull the rib cage out. Right. Then he did the bench press to put the pecs on the rib cage.
Right.
You know what I mean? So,
and like you were saying earlier about Yeah, Butch definitely. You could tell Butch has been an athlete, right?
Yeah.
He had the mug to go with it.
Yeah. Actually, he played rugby, and he was in the front. You know, we have our forwards in the rugby. It's called a scrum, where 8 men go down against 8 men, and there's 3 in the front row. The hooker who hooks the ball back, and they throw the ball in, and then there's 2 props. He was the tight head prop on the side where his head's hooked inside there, and the front there, and that front row, that's where you clash heads and you get fucked up. Anyhow, he played rugby, and he played rugby right up to 65, and then he started wrestling at 65. Anyhow, promotion saw him, and then over there, and they heard, come over to our gym, and you want to work out the words. So I think Hogman called him over and says, you want to work out, because the guy that worked out, who was Mr. New Zealand in 1950, he worked out in a few gyms. But Coolman's was the main one, but he was well known throughout the capital city as Mr. New Zealand. And Wellington, he had a signing business too. He would do signings for businesses and all that sort of stuff. Al Hogman was well known in the capital city because he was an artist.
Right.
And then turned a wrestler and Mr. New Zealand, and he sent a message to Butch to come over to our gym to work out. And Butch started working out at our gym in '66. And of course, at those times, it was on the wrestling shows, there was 3 or 4 professional matches. Up to intermission, it was amateur wrestling. This is a professional wrestling show. Amateur wrestling, and then professional wrestling would start after the first intermission.
Yes.
And and I would work in a single against somebody. Butch would work in a single against somebody, and then the second match, I would come in and help Butch win. We'd cheat, and then after the mission, we'd come back in a tag against the guy that I wrestled and the guy that Butch wrestled. We'd tag up against those 2, and then there was the main event. So on the card, there may be one other match. On the card, there was 4, 6, 8 pros, 6 or 8 pros at the most. That was the card.
And the amateurs.
And the amateurs, Each town we went to, the amateur club would do the first half. You know what I mean? And the promotion would hang something to them. So that's how it was. Wow. When we first started. So then that's how Butch and me started tagging up. In '66.
Now, was that still in New Zealand, or was this?
No, that was just in New Zealand. And then John De Silva, who went over to the Empire Games and won a bronze medal or silver medal in the Empire Games. He was from New Zealand, but he was a Polynesian guy. He won a gold medal, a silver or bronze medal. He was 6'4", and he won a medal in the games. He turned pro in UK in about 62. After, I don't know what year the Commonwealth Games was, maybe 60. Anyhow, he turned pro, and then he came back home in '66, and he bought the promotion out from Al Hogman and started running 6 to 7 days a week, all around the country. Now, we had no television still, but they would go post to the town and buy radio spots. You know what I mean? There was only some towns, there's only one radio station, you know what I mean?
And did you guys run those towns weekly?
No. We'd go, we'd run Wellington, the main 2 towns, Auckland and Wellington. I think we ran them once a month, or once every 2 or 3 weeks. But the rest of the towns, there's so many little towns, we were doing little towns, we'd get 300 people, 250, 300 people. And the big towns, 2,000. Capital city, 2,500, 2,000. The average town, I'd say, would be, if you looked over the whole situation, you'd average, say, 800, 600 a house, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You get the big ones, but you know, you weren't paying much for the card.
Right.
And that, and I don't know what the ticket prices were at that time. They were very cheap. And, you know, no cost. They paid motels, you know, and of course we had to double up in the room.
Sure.
Butch and me would be we stayed in motels most of the time, but we'd be doubled up in the motel there. The motel is, which, you know, it's got a kitchen, a lounge, and one bedroom, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the motels. And he'd get them for the boys, and there'd always be 2 in the unit, you know what I mean? And that was it, on the road.
Would one of those rooms then typically cost on a nightly basis?
£10, if that.
Yeah.
£5 a night.
And what were you guys making for the New Zealand promotion at this time?
At that time, the whole week would be $100, with the average worker $100, $120. The average worker, like journeyman, tradesman, they were making 40 a week.
Yeah. So
40 a week.
yeah. So
No, going back to pounds. Fucking, they were making £20 a week.
Mm-hmm.
I was an apprentice. I remember I was making £3 when I started on my apprentice.
Wow.
I'm an engineer by trade. And I did when I was doing this sort of stuff, up to 66, I did my apprenticeship in 4 years because I did a lot of overtime, and I could fly out. I was right by the airport. I could fly out to the shows and be back in, coming in a 6 o'clock plane. I could be back in the job at 8 o'clock in the morning. You know what I mean?
Now, to interject here, that's got to be a tough decision. I mean, you've trained to be an engineer, and I'm sure there were good jobs available for engineers.
Yes.
But you try to explain to the fans that once you got sucked in, it's like sort of like the mob, right? Once they suck you in, you can't get out.
No.
They love the business so much. In my case, teaching or medical school, that we still stayed in this. So like that could have been a very lucrative career as an engineer.
Yeah, and that in my last year as doing that sort of thing, the engineering, what I was doing was lathe work, gas, and arc welding, you know, and lathes, you know, turning stuff down on lathes and doing prototypes for stuff and that, you know what I mean? For furniture, making jigs where they actually put the, you know, we did all the hospital stuff, all, you know, all the steel, the chrome stuff, all stuff you see in hospital, stainless steel stuff, all the operating tables and all the equipment on the stands and all that. We made all that sort of equipment.
Right.
And furniture too, like we did runs of chairs and that, you know, because we had our own chroming bath and the factories, and we had our own paint rooms and that where they'd paint the stuff, they put them in the oven and bake it, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So it would be harder than that. And in the last year, I became charge hand, and as I got out of my apprentice, I was a foreman in a shop, and I was still fucking young, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And I think I was 19 or 18. I was a foreman, and I was still resting, and that's when I got the urge. Then I fucking left it and became full time.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, again,
we put the years together. Yeah. Yeah, 66. I got out of my train and that, and all of a sudden, I started wrestling full time.
Yes.
And then, and the guys said to me, you know, they wanted to send me up to a thing and that, and became, you know, they said, you're on the way, as a foreman, you're on the way to become a supervisor, a factory supervisor. You know, you need to do some courses and that, and we will, you know, through us, and then you're working in different places, and you can work up to look after them, but I had the taste.
Yeah, right. It's so. I'm gonna jump forward like you and Butch. You guys meet, when did you say 65?
66.
66. And so.
Started tagging up.
Have you guys been together since then?
Yes.
Obviously, there are little side things you guys would do, but for the most part, did you guys start off as the sheep herders?
No. In New Zealand, we didn't have it. It was Brute Miller. His name was Bob, Boodle Bob Miller.
Yeah.
And by now I was Sweet William from Jim Barnett. Boodle Bob Miller, Sweet William. We were Beauty and the Beast.
Right.
Butch. First time we went to Singapore and around that and Penang and all that up in Malaysia, and then I had Butch on a collar and chain leading him around, and that it was sweet. I had the long gowns, the long blonde hair, and that as a fag, and I'm leading this fucking woman like this on a collar and chain around. That's how we come to the States.
Is that right?
Yeah, anyhow, that was it. It was Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I'm trying to wrap my brain around this. When I was a kid, it wasn't quite as remote, like 1 station or 3 stations, but we did have 3 stations whenever I was a kid here. And the wrestling stuff in Pittsburgh, we would only get the WWWF. Studio Wrestling. But I would be able to read in the wrestling magazine about the NWA in San Francisco and Portland. Yeah. And I remember seeing still shots of you and Butch and the blood and the crazy faces. And I was well aware of you guys long before.
That was George Napolitano, who's a good friend of mine, close. I used to stay at his home and he used to stay at my home. That's how long I've known George. I met him in 1972. We haven't got to 72 yet, but that's when I first met him.
Okay. In 72 when you guys first came to North America?
Yes.
Vis-a-vis America or through Canada?
Canada.
Okay. Very similar to Dominic, because Dominic had left right after the war. He was turning 18 right towards the end of World War II.
Yeah.
And his dad they had national service. Everybody had to go to the military. Yeah. His dad didn't want him after the war.
47, 46.
Yeah, 46, I think.
46.
And got him, he told the story about how his dad got an attorney and they took him down to the rail station, which would take him to the boat to come over. But they were hiding. They would send cops to the station to see if they saw any 18-year-old men trying to leave. And so they had to keep hiding Dominic to get him out. What always struck me was
tall bastard.
Yeah, right. And, you see those younger pictures of Dominic. He looked like a movie star.
Yeah.
And he had that dark skin.
No. The Spiros Ariana, Dominic DeNucci, Mario Milano, they were all great-looking guys.
Yeah, big guys and good-looking guys.
Yeah.
But Dominic would talk about his first day in Canada. And he would remember it with such specificity. The day it was, what the weather was, what time of day they pulled into the port. And I asked him, I thought he said, tell him the story, he said, February 7th, 1951, and he stopped and he said, it was a Tuesday or Friday, whatever. And I started laughing. I said, you made that part up, right? And he said, no, why? I said, how did you remember what day it was 70 years ago? And he looked at me, got a twinkle in his eye, and he said, because getting to Canada was one step closer to getting to America, and coming to America was like going to heaven.
Yes.
And his eyes would like well up.
Yeah, my God, dude.
How incredible an experience that was. I can't imagine at 18 years old leaving my country and going someplace else where I don't speak the language or anything else. That'd be pretty.
How many people come to America right now?
Yes.
And this bloody guy is giving them money and that and giving them a home and everything. I'm not mentioning the guy's name, but we all know. And they can't talk English.
Right.
Mate, keep talking. I'm just going to get something off the table. My billy goat is getting a bit dry. And if you want to know what a billy goat is, that's your bloody throat. Keep talking.
So I mean, again, as you guys know, that Appalachian Expose, I get to talk to my coworkers and my friends, guys that I've known. In Luke's case, approaching 40 years. And
whoa! I'm back.
Now I'm curious. So you guys, like I said, I remember reading about you guys in the magazines, and there was a legend to the sheep herders even before I ever met or saw you guys. They were preceding you guys.
We came over here, mate, as the Kiwis, and they didn't know what a Kiwi is. Now I'm going to tell you that, and we New Zealand Kiwis. I went to Japan well before I come over here, and I'm in Japan, and I see a fruit in the railway stations. You know how you have the mesh bar things of the fruit, different fruits there, and I see the Chinese gooseberry, which is the New Zealand name for this fruit.
Yeah.
New Zealand name for it, Chinese gooseberry, but it's got kiwi fruit on it. The Japanese have called our Chinese gooseberry kiwi fruit, and that as an export name, and all of a sudden that name went all over the world. So the kiwi fruit originally was called the Chinese gooseberry.
Really?
Yeah.
Never
Fluffy. You know, it's got a little fluffy fur on it.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, and that was the Chinese goose. The kiwi. So we come over, and the kiwi is a New Zealander. The kiwi is a bird from New Zealand, the smallest bird for its size. It lays the biggest egg, and it's getting, you know, it's a night bird. It comes out at night and it's extinct. But it's not. They sort of made it, you know, looked after it now,
right,
so
protected.
Protected it, so it's hasn't become extinct. Anyhow, so we come over and they said the Kiwis, New Zealand Kiwis, that's what we're known, you know.
Right.
When we come over here, 72, right up to 79, we were known as the New Zealand Kiwis.
Okay. And first promotion you guys came to Canada, was it for Montreal or was it?
No, the two Vachons, Butcher and Paul Vachon, brought us over. Paul, which is Butcher, and Maurice Vachon brought us over here. Now, going back a couple of years, Andre the Giant came to New Zealand in 69-70, 7'4", 350 pounds. I got a photo I'm going to show you later of Andre. I should pull it out and show the cameras, but we can do that later. You wouldn't believe it's the same guy.
Yeah.
Oh, you see the shoe, you would. It's a fucking boat.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a boat. Andre could do drop kicks. 6'4", 350 pounds.
7'4".
7'4",
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Making him a midget. Anyhow, and you know when he died, he's 5'40". You know, in WWE he was 5 to 5'40". Anyhow, Butcher, we worked all over New Zealand with him in handicap matches, except in the two main towns. The promoter had to be his partner, and we worked against him and the promoter. So when I came to North America, we came into Grand Prix. Being French, Andre the Giant's first territory in North America was Grand Prix, because it's a French promotion. You know, the Vachons had bought him there, and the place had exploded. They were running 3 towns a night. When we came to Canada from Grand Prix, now I never knew this. I was working 1 town a night and didn't know till 3 weeks later when we had a meeting and at the office before we did TV and that. And I saw these guys there and I said, you guys are coming in or whatever. And they said, no, we've been here for ages. And that, you know, there's a few that I'd known from Australia.
Yeah.
But we were 2 new boys on the block. And that, and of course, the main baby face was Andre the Giant.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the main heel was Wally Kowalski, who we knew from Australia. And Wally took us under his thumb straight away. He said, you boys drive with me, because we'd known him Australia.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
You boys drove, so we drove with Wally to all the towns.
Yeah.
So we were taken care of, you know what I mean?
Oh, sure. The little side note about Killer, when I first met, well, I wasn't first met him, but when we were running the ECW shows up in Boston, Walter would come by. He still had school at that time. And he would sit and talk to me about nutrition, the temperature of the water to drink. For a while, he almost thought it was crazy.
You think what? You think he's fucking crazy?
Yeah, but boy, did he know his stuff.
Hey, mate, he had a body before people knew what a body was.
Right.
He had a body, you know, a big man's body, you know, that arms, shoulders, he just...
Yeah, he was something else. And
a vegetarian in the end.
Yes, sir. But when you go back and watch him performing as a heel, for those of us in the business, you know, we watch stuff like that and see brilliance in what they're doing. The average fan would watch, say, somebody from the wrestling from that period. Oh, it's so basic, right? But you watch how everything just piece, like a puzzle being
put together.
But he got into the ring. He had to be God mid to late 70s. We were working out before the show. He got
Did he referee?
No, he trained with us. He got in. He said, "I want to show you something." So he tells me to cover him. So I go to do the cover, and he goes, "Okay, you ready? You ready?" And I said, "I'm gonna roll you off without using my hands." I'm like, "Okay, sure you go." He did something with his foot, hooked my foot, and rolled me right over. It was like somebody, like a magic trick. How the hell did you do that? Been watching it, but he used to get in with us and do that all the time. Fascinating guy to listen to, and he would watch the matches. And when we come back, he would say, "Hey," and talk to little pointers about story and things. It was really amazing to me that seeing these guys, knowing these guys, and getting to learn from them, guys like Bruno and Dominic and Killer. And you saw just how much they loved the business, how much they protected the business, and how proficient they were at the business. You know, long before social media, they're packing Madison Square Gardens, and
Killer was on top Madison Square Gardens in the 50s, late 50s.
Yeah, selling the places out is just amazing. I want to get back to you and Butch because I'm enthralled by this. By the time I got to know you guys, you had Johnny Ace as the flag bearer. But again, I had known so much about you guys before that, and this was like at the tail end, like right before you guys were heading to New York to make the change from that to the Bushwhackers. But I remember the audience's reaction to you guys. As a kid, you're watching and trying to learn, and when you guys would go through that curtain, like the audience instantly turned. Like if there was a baby face a minute ago, they're cheering and having fun. You guys would come out, and that audience would instantly turn, and you had it in the palm of your hands.
Now, you know what was a big help, mate? Being a foreigner.
Yeah.
And we dwelt on that, the flag, saluting the flag, and then we realized too, having a flag bearer gave us more heat, and that because we had American turncoats.
Yes. Yeah.
And that put a lot of heat to a lot of kids. Every promoter caught on then. They're going to make this guy a heel and put him with the sheep herders, but they learned the business. We helped them learn the business and they put heat on them. So when they actually started wrestling, they had heat already. You know what I mean?
Right. I remember the iconic angle that you guys had with the Fantastics. Tommy.
Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers.
Tommy Rogers, I was thinking Tommy Rogers. Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton. Good-looking babyface guys, right? And you guys went out there.
And they were wrestlers when we first, I'd known Bobby Fulton and Tommy for a long time. I knew Bobby since '81 when I worked for Jerry Jarrett. And he was a punchy little kid, and Billy got him training, and he went down from, I think maybe 280, 250. I never saw him like that.
Yeah.
But now he got him down to 200, 210 pounds. And that, and then when I went to, my first booking job was for Joe Blanchard, the Southwest Championship Wrestling. Billy rings me up and he says, Bobby Fulton, I'm going to get him out of here, can you take him? Billy Dundee being, I've known Billy since 1965 when I was going over to Australia to work in the clubs, club wrestling before Jim Barnett come over, and then I met him over there. And Billy Dundee used to come to New Zealand and even Jonathan Boyd, they used to come under American names and that, because they wrestled because they could work, you know what I mean?
Right.
They could work the chain wrestling shit. Plus, they could work American style because they'd be working for Jim Barnett.
Right.
So Billy done rings up, and I bring Bobby Fulton in there, and I gave Bobby Fulton his first, not straight away, I built him up and gave him his first main event against Eric Emery in scaffold match.
Wow.
Anyhow.
That was Southwest.
Yeah, Southwest. Now, when I came into Bill Watts' territory, we came in not getting wins. We were just jumping over the rails, and before the baby faces got to the ring, we would beat them up and get DQ'd.
Right.
That's how we got over in all the territories like that.
Right.
But we did another angle in most territories, but I'll get to that later on.
Okay.
Now these two guys, when we first met them, they were wrestlers. They were wrestling baby faces.
Right.
They didn't know how to fight, but we turned those two little guys into fighters.
Yeah.
You know, smaller guys, 210, 215, or no, 210, 200, 205, 210,
Yeah.
but they had big hearts.
Right.
And they got on, they learned fast. Bobby always says, he said, you got us over, which we did. I'm not bragging here, but we learned, we could wrestle to high spots. That was I used to do drop kicks and flying head scissors. And you know, that way back in New Zealand and that, but all of a sudden, we've got these two guys and that, and we groomed them to learn how to fight back, and they became fighters and that.
Right.
And we drew big money with these two little guys.
Baby faces with fire.
Baby faces with fire, and who could fucking take a good ass whipping but not die.
Right.
They would sell and still in that selling fight back.
Yeah.
Because we says if you lay down too long without fighting back, the people will forget about
That's
it.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
And they got onto that straight away. I used to pound that in their heads.
Yeah.
You've got to try and fight back now and again. We'll cut you off. Butcher me can get the people to stand up and sit down.
Yes.
And that's having a team you're talking to and working with.
Right.
And we could get those people to come.
And trusted you guys.
Huh?
And they knew to trust you guys.
Yeah.
That's the.
Yeah, well, we wouldn't have got where we were. It wasn't until, when we came in to North America, and, when I said there's a Grand Prix and that, all of a sudden, we were on top. We were in each town they had a single top and a tag team top, and we were on the second or third town. We were the top tag team,
Right.
and that's in our first territory.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And with a single and that, after a month, Edward Capote was going back to Grand Prix. Edward Capote, the Flying Frenchman, was partners with the Vachons, and we worked against. Butcher was 350, and Paul was only Morris was only 220, but we worked against those guys a lot, the Vachons, and we worked, and then the other tag team was the Andre the Giant and Edward Capote. We worked a lot with them. We were there for a year and a half, and then the other two teams, Gino Brito.
Right.
And Dino Bravo, who you all know.
The original or the second Dino Bravo?
Dino Bravo worked for WWE.
Okay, so that was the second one.
Yes.
Dominic had tagged with
the
original.
Dino Bravo. So the Dino Bravo, he was only 19 then, and that Dino Brito was the dad. I told you who his dad was, and that he was much older, and Dino Brito and Dino Bravo, and then. And the other tag team we worked with was Johnny War Eagle and Billy Two Rivers. Billy Two Rivers was the first Indian, American Indian, and went to Europe and overseas to England. He was the first ever Indian to go, not from India. Britain's full of those Indians from India, the Singhs, and that. But Billy Two Rivers. He's still alive.
Is that right?
He's a chief. Well, he's bedridden. God bless them all. Wheelchair, but Billy Two Rivers and that. He'd write on wall paint, and he'd put a boot here and put a shoe here. A foot like a drop kick.
Yeah.
And then he would do crazy shit. This guy, but he could work.
Yeah.
And Billy Two Rivers. Johnny War Eagle. Billy was a big guy, and Johnny and that. Now we worked with them all the time, and I say we did a couple of heel matches against Wally. That's the first time I actually worked against Wally Kowalski.
Yeah.
And that me and Butch.
I'm so fascinated.
Getting back to sorry I took you all from the Fantastics, but there was two kids that we had a good run, and the run came to an end because me and Butch walked out because I found out about the pay scale. We were main event every night, in barbed wire cage matches, and got a team before the team that was going before the mission was getting paid more money than us, and that because he was the Booker's. He was the Booker's boys, and that was a territory that is that Donald Trump calling me or Biden? Anyhow, that was a job. We all make mistakes in life, mate. And I'm booking in Puerto Rico for Carlos Colon at the time, 84. Bill Dundee has finished his run for Bill Watts. He calls me up with Bill on the phone. He says, how would you like to come in here and be the booker here? I said, bloody right. So I knew how that territory was money-wise. And Billy had popped it wide open with the Rock and Roll at midnight, and we were the Rock and the Midnight were a wrestling tag team, and the Rock and Roll. You know, we work with the Rock and Roll a lot. They can work with anybody. But I thought, well, we come in there now and we give them the blood and guts, and that shit, we got to make some big money. But when I came in, he left early. And I had being a booker, I had to finish up a couple of programs in Puerto Rico, so it was 2 or 3 months before I could get away, 2.5 months. So the intern booker they had there was Dickie Slater. And when I came in there, I know Dickie from Florida, and when I came in there, they had him as a booker and that. And they said to me, will you take it over? Well, I said, well, are you getting rid of Dickie? You know what I mean? Because you don't, when you bring another booker in, you finish the other booker. Because he can always sabotage you. You know what I mean? Even though I know Dickie from Florida. And that, I said, they said, no, we're not getting rid of him. We want him to work for you. Work under there. And I never took the book. And now, 2 months later, or a month and a half later, they bring in Ken Mantell from Dallas, and he brings in all his crew from Dallas. And that was the worst mistake I made. He tried to kill us too. He put Jack Victory with us. We had a flag bearer, but he put Jack Victory. He started with the 3 of us, and we're all bigger than the Fantastics, right? And we couldn't win. And then he put Lady Maxine with us, a 6'2" woman, Lady Maxine or Mad Maxine, whatever you want to call her, and that was us too. She didn't know it was a word, or she got an idea, but she says, fuck, I can beat these 2 kids myself. Why are you getting your hands raised? You know what I mean? And you know, he thought doing all that, it would kill us, you know what I mean? But it made us stronger. Even though we were doing jobs, it made us stronger to the show, because we would say on the thing, look, we've got 2 Americans who shits on the country. You know what I mean? What's the word you use there? Demotes the country, or what's the word?
Undermines the country?
Anyhow, you know, we've got 2 Americans, and we'd say to them, would you rather be with that, or you would rather be with the sheepherds? When we come and get our hand raised all the time, not that we get a hand raised, that's how we'd rather be with the New Zealand sheepherders. And then, you know, and that got us more heat. See, we used to say, yeah, look, we've got Americans. They're leaving you.
Now, I'm curious at this time, we're talking like in the 80s, coming out, just out of the 70s and 80s, late 80s, still very much down there, what we term the Bible Belt. With you guys coming in and being so hyper-violent compared to anything in America prior to that, in those smaller towns, was there ever a time that you guys had issues with the town, with the cops?
I can't remember how many times that we had to go on police cars to leave the building, and someone drove our car out the outskirts of town. You know, they drove police cars into the building, and now, you know, Austin, Texas. We couldn't have our car near the building there. They'd fucking turn it over. But they did turn the cars over in Puerto Rico. And I got Puerto Ricans, they put a razor blade in their hand and they slap you and drag it down and slice your arm. I've been in court a few times on that for Puerto Rico. You know, situations where they're trying to sue me because because I grabbed them by their hair and dragged them to security and that, and they said I kicked them up the crutch. I can tell you stories with a woman a month later or 6 weeks later in the court case. I showed the bruises on her legs and the blue and yellow here 6 weeks later. And the judge said, just shoot it out. When she showed that, we went right the case and then she said, I'll show you evidence. And she had those just done, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, shit like that.
I remember, like, towards the front end of ECW, we were having trouble with the local governments. We were going to some of the smaller towns in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, that they were very questionable about what we were doing. Some of them thought it was like a human cockfight. Let's let these guys go in and just beat each other up and everything. And we had to sort of like figure out ways to traverse through that. You guys have proceeded by at least a decade, ECW, with that, again, that violent style that most Americans
from
have never seen.
1979 onwards. But all the promoters we worked for, mate, had an end that they were well known. Like Joe was well known in the state of Texas because he'd wrestled there for years, in the 50s and 60s, and the politicians. And that Don Owens was grandfathered in. His parents, they'd been in the business since the 40s.
Right.
You know what I mean? They had they'd done money for the sheriff and the county and that, draw money in that. You know what I mean? Your entity was run by a new boy on the block, you know, when Paul Heyman and that. Right. You know what I mean? Right. And he was the mouthpiece. Yes. As a heel mouthpiece too.
Right. It's and going back in this business again. Like I'm just running through my head. You guys talking about cops needing to come in and get you and drive you out, and the car being driven out. That white heat. That's for the longest time. I always thought that was just bragging from the old timers because wrestling fans know what it is or whatever. And then you go back and you come in contact with videos of you guys wrestling back in that time frame, and others that started coming behind it. But that prior to that, in my head anyway, wrestling seemed like Bruno wrestling, right? The grabbing, the catch can style. A little bit of brawling, but still it was mostly like chain wrestling. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you guys explode onto the scene with magazines. Everybody had you guys on covers and things because of the faces and the crazy look of it and the blood. And I remember sitting there reading these magazines and thinking, like, these guys are crazy. Like, how are they doing this? First of all, with the hardcore style and where it's gone, do you sometimes think like maybe it's gone too far and you feel almost like a negativity toward it because you think it's just become like just garbage cans and swinging them?
Right. When I saw thumbtacks in the ring and bulbs and all that cheapened all that hardcore stuff there.
Right.
That AEW now, there's thumbtacks thrown out every second show.
Right.
Isn't it? There's thumbtacks too, or every third show. At least once a month, there's thumbtacks in the ring. Yes. They haven't had the fluorescent bulbs in the ring, but promoters started using those with you. Fluorescent bulbs. There's stacks of them used fluorescent bulbs just laying around and dumps and that, and they look good when they fucking smash over your head and the powder goes everywhere. Yeah. Fuck, everybody knows what they're made of. Right. You know what I mean? Right. Why are they selling that sort of shit? You know what I mean? Yeah. And the powder is bad to inhale.
It's poison. Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. I couldn't understand that. And hey, like anything, we started off with one table in a match, one table, and then two tables, and now they've got so many tables, and there's a ladder match, instead of just having two ladders at the most, there's fucking 4 or 5 ladders. Yeah. Everything's been exaggerated so much that it's, fuck. Yeah. It's gone overboard.
Yeah, it loses its oomph. To me, though,
now, the young kids think today more the better.
Right.
Well, they don't look how they've killed it.
Right.
Because now the people want fucking more and more, and they next minute, which they can't do, but is shoot somebody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, so there's certain physical limits of what can be done, done realistically. The thing I think, if there's one word that to me encapsulated what the sheep herders then were, was legitimate. Right, the fans were terrified of you.
Yeah.
The guys who were wrestling would sell it as being very concerned. Like, hey, can we even get through this match without getting hurt? And to me, that was a different flavor to wrestling than anything I'd seen before that.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like it was taking it in this, crazy direction of if you knew the sheep herders were going to show up, you knew it was going to be a crazy fucking night.
It's going to be blood and guts.
Yes.
That's what Kerry used to say when he used to go down to New Orleans, who was living down at the time. He says, I never saw that sort of shit till I'm sitting there and then these two guys jumping over the barrier and we're open, unscrewing the flag and fucking just beating these guys to fucking hell.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then put the flag back together and with the bodies laying around holding the flag up. Like we conquered Mount Everest.
Right.
That's what the heat was, though.
Yeah, and if Bill Watts used to always tell me, tell the boys, at Thanksgiving dinner, nobody wants to sit down and just have a big pile of turkey, right? You want a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And so in the UWF Mid-South prior to that, you had, your junkyard dogs that were sort of a gimmick match. You had your great wrestlers, you had your great tag teams. Now here come you guys, and you got this uber violent team.
Yeah.
Again, a little bit of everything, right? That was coming into the
wrestlers.
Yes. So now it's trying to sort of. I guess I hate to fast forward. We can do this all day.
But I say one thing, Shane, that we did was we didn't come out and grab like today. They grabbed the fucking the gimmicks and used right off the bat.
Right.
We built the match up. So if we had a chair involved in it in the end, we would use it when it was needed to be used in the heat, and then it would come out in the fucking end where we'd get drop kicked out of our hands, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we gave it to them in the end.
Right.
Where now they give it to them right from the word go.
Right.
And that's what's cooled our business. I'm sorry guys, but independently I'm talking about that's what killed our business. That's why you can't draw more than 200 or 300 people, 200 people in these towns, because the promoters are letting these guys go out the first, second, third match, go all over the building, and use the gimmicks everywhere. Yeah. What's there for the main event?
Exactly. Yeah.
The main event has to be a big name or a super match. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. And you're right. It's overkill of the use of stuff. We were talking in the dressing room last night with some of the kids there. Up in Grafton, West Virginia, about how there's a time and place for everything. And just because you can do 10, 20 of this move or that move doesn't mean you should do 10 or 20 moves. It's build it to the right place. I always thought, and I picked it up from watching you guys as the sheep herders in ECW, where the chairs and the tables started becoming a little bit too ubiquitous.
Yeah.
Bring the chair in at some point early-ish in the match. But don't use it. It gets taken away whenever, but it's sitting there.
The referee taken away.
Yeah, it's there like the 900-pound.
So they've been teased.
Right.
Now they know winners are going to come again.
Right.
That's the whole story.
Right. And finally build to it. But
yes.
I want to jump forward because again I love talking about the sheep herder stuff.
Now, how far forward? How many feet do you want to jump forward?
What year was it that you guys made the transition from sheep herders to bushwhackers going to WWF?
88.
I thought
okay, then I'm in Columbus, Ohio, which is on the border of Louis, Kentucky, right? Columbus is on the border, isn't it?
Columbus is more the middle part of the state.
No. What's
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati.
Border, yes.
And I get a butchers and they were in Gold's Gym and that, and I would never work out. I wasn't a drum man. You know what I mean? With the drummers, the middle, this middle section. Butch always did 10 minutes on the and that was a big mistake too. I never did it.
Yeah.
And I went out to the phone. In those days, we had an answer phone at home, and I dial my thing and pick up my messages because we're on the road for so many days, without going home. NWA was all over the place those days. And I called up and there was a voice that said, Pat here, can you give me a call at this number? I want to talk to you. Blah, blah, blah. And I hang up and so I called this number. And he said, Pat here. Pat, I said, Pat there? He said, yeah, this is Pat speaking. Who the fucking hell is Pat? And then he said, I got a guy who wants to talk to you. And he handed it over. Well, he didn't hand it over. It was on speakerphone. It goes to speakerphone.
Yeah.
And it says, hey Kiwi, this is Vince McMahon. Now, I'd been sending tapes to there from Betamax. Betamax is back in the early 80s to Vince Sr. and then tapes to Vince Jr. But Vince Sr. one of the big guys there.
Yeah.
Because even Roddy went in 81, 82, and they said he did a great promo, but he was too small.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I've been sending tapes to him for years and years. And he said, yeah, Vince here. And I said, all of a sudden, I said, yes, sir. And blah, blah, blah. He says, hey, you interested in coming in? I said, boy, I've been sending tapes here since day one. And then he says, well, you know, the window opened. They just fired the fucking British Bulldogs, and they wanted a British team.
Right.
Or Queen, New Zealand was under the British flag, right?
Sure.
And he said, you know, when you come in, when can you come and see? You interested? And he says, we need to have a day off. And straight away I says, Wednesday. We didn't have Wednesday off, but it gave us time to bloody, to Crockett's. To Crockett's. So we took Wednesday. I said we had to get to renew our visas. Well, so I don't know what I knew said. And he has the office.
And how soon before you guys were up there talking?
You know, no. So no. This was Saturday, right? He says, and I said next Wednesday, and he says, well, tickets will be on your doorstep when you get home. Give me your address.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, when I got back to Charlotte, the tickets were on my doorstep, sitting there.
Yeah.
And Wednesday, we flew up first class to LaGuardia or Kennedy. The limousine was there to pick us up and took us to Titan Towers. We're in the hallway sitting out there, and next minute they said, come in. And visited his desk. He says, oh, nice to meet you. Shake hands and that. He says, hey, how would you guys like to be the good guys, baby faces? And of course, I piped up and says, which being in nature of being a booker, bring us in the heels and turn us baby faces. Little did I know you don't tell Caesar what to do.
Right.
He says, oh, that's not my style. He says, I want to bring you baby faces. And Butchers, how can you make these faces baby faces? He says, look at the mugs on my top baby faces. Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Look at that fucking face. You know, one eye this way, one eye that way. And look at those three guys' mugs, right? He says, check out those guys' mugs. And Butch got up on his desk and with lo and behold, he leaned over his desk and his face was just far away from Vince, and he said, if you can make these faces baby faces, his nose is that baby that far away from Vince's, I don't know whether he was spitting on Vince or not, go for it.
Yeah. Wow.
Hey, go for it. And he said, well, I'd like to bring you up each week here and do vignettes for at least 3 weeks. 4 weeks, bring you up. So each time we went up there, we did 2 or 3 vignettes. Which, you know what a vignette is, a small movie.
Yep.
And we were lucky at that time, Crocodile D2 had just come out, the movie.
Yes. And
of course, we jumped on straight on that bandwagon and, used the same sayings that he was using from the movies and that.
Yeah.
Well, we were already saying them, but we over-exaggerated them and that. And we did it, you know what I mean? And we did vignettes. crazy vignettes. I'm thinking of some of them now.
Yeah.
And I can't remember them all, but we did vignettes for 2 months. He was letting out 2 a week. Now there was Monday night. It wasn't Raw at the time, or some other show, and there was at that time. Vince was on all the networks, NBC, ABC, CBS, plus he had USA Network.
Yeah.
That's why it was doing so good. It wasn't until 92 with the sex scandal, steroids and sex scandal, that he lost all those. He was lucky that he still had USA Network. He lost a lot of those channels, NBC, ABC, CBS. All of a sudden, from 164 channels, he had maybe 25 or 40 left, you know what I mean? From 160 channels around the country.
Right, syndicated, yes.
Yeah, he lost all those, but he still, that's when the business took a fucking dive.
Right.
Because not everyone had cable at the time, you know what I mean?
Did you guys find it difficult to make the transition from that?
I know, everyone now, pardon me folks, every fucking agent was trying to give us other ideas. You know, George wanted us to come up from the stands upstairs, and that one of us with popcorn and a big thing coming to the ring, other one with a drink. And he says, why don't you just come from upstairs, the other one come down the aisle. Now, splitting us up for a start.
Right.
Is people, how can the people contract on two?
Right,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
and each agent, another agent too. It was the straighter agent was the guy from Minnesota who was the champion there for so long.
Gagne?
Dick Bushwhacker.
Nick Buckwinkle.
Yeah, he wanted to do it one way. Each agent wanted to do his rest. In the end, Butch says to me, every time we worked his heels in Atlanta and that, when we went throwing out the ring, we'd swing our arms up, and the people would go, wow, yay, to scare them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Butch says, let's go to the ring, swing our arms, and I says, my shoulders are fucked. I said, literally, my shoulders are fucked, I can't swing them, going to him. He turned around and he said, do you want to make fucking money?
Figure out.
He screamed to me, do you want to make fucking money? And that hence we went back to vision and we started high stepping and swinging our arms to the ring. And fucking fans caught on that straight away.
Yeah, I love
And then he'd been over and he's rubbing fans' heads. And that, you know how the fans put out to want to give you the nudge or tag you, and he'd rub their heads. And all of a sudden he started
licking out.
But now I actually put my hand there and licked the back of my hand.
Yeah.
He was laying the fucking juices on those greasy fucking dirty fucking pigs out there. Anyhow, that was God bless them, the fans. What am I saying? Yeah. No. But you know how they're sweating in the arenas and that, and people there. I'm not being rude here, mate. There's been, everyone in the arena is hot those days and that, and those big arenas, there's 18,000 people, and they're sweating. You know, if your adrenaline's running and you're screaming at fans, you're sweating, and your energy's running, your blood's pumping, you're sweating. And I think he was licking them, I'm not sure, but whatever. Anyhow, everybody caught on to it. That gimmick, that arm ringing and that. There was guys in the NFL, as soon as they did a touchdown in the end zone, they were doing the Bushwhacker. And that's how the gimmick started. It took us about 3 weeks to get that down to a T. 2 weeks, and we had it, you know.
Yes.
It took us 2 hours. Now, Vince gave us the name. I forgot to get back there. So anyhow, we come up, I saw Vince, and then next minute, contracts arrive at home. Butch calls me and he says, Vince has sent the wrong contracts to us. It's got the Bushwhackers. And straight away I said to Butch, he wants to own us for merchandising.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then he put two and two together and says, he had the Bushwhacker. Now Bushwhacker is like a Robin Hood.
Right.
A Bushwhacker is a person that fucking comes up behind someone, nails them, robs them, and gives it to, And they did that. Now Mick Jagger did that show. He was a bushwhacker. He did a show down in Australia, you know, at the television, no, a movie. And he was the Robin Hood guy in it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Doing that sort of stuff. That's what a bushwhacker is. You know, if it comes down to the bush and fuck, a Robin Hood.
Yes.
And that's it. But that was the name, and everyone said, oh, they gave you the gimmick, and I said, no, we put that gimmick together. They never. Vince said, I want you between the Moondogs and the Sheepherders. And Butch said to me, the Moondogs have been on the USA Network for 5 or 6 years, and the Sheepherders have been on TBS and TNT. We've been on and off that since 79, 80, when we first worked for Crockett, right? And then we were working for NWA Things, so we'd been on that Turner Network off and on from 79, 80, right from 80 right through to 88.
Yeah.
So he said, let's create something different. And that's how we come to put that shit together. And that was our.
Did you ever think, in hindsight, looking back, I spot patterns in my career that I didn't notice at the time. You guys, by this time going to WWF then, as the Bushwhackers, the style that you guys had been doing was not a style you could do for the rest of your life. I mean, it was a very physical style as the Sheepherders.
Yeah.
At the time, I'm sure there was consternation because you guys were so over as heels as the Sheepherders. Was there any hesitation in becoming this Bushwhackers?
No, we were professionals, mate. We knew it was a work.
Right. Well,
everyone asked this question, what you just said.
Yeah.
No hesitation at all. Vince says, this will be much easier on your body.
Oh,
he said to us, I'll make you bushwhackers and that you're getting on in life. We're getting on. and now he said, you know, and this is going to be much easier on you.
Yeah.
But being the bushwhacker was much harder than being
Is that right? In what way?
The energy level.
Sure, yeah.
Fuck, we kept that pump going all the time, and we never stopped. You never saw us leaning, you know, tag teams leaning on the apron while the other guys in the ring.
Right.
No leaning on the apron. The other guys going up and down the apron, cheerleading. You know, pumping the people and yelling at me, come on, Lou, and then getting the people, blah blah blah. That was much harder, you know. Going to the ring for a start, you know, you go to the ring, you get blown. I used to be blowing up going to the ring, you know. When I go to independent shows, if everyone puts their hand out, I go around. The time I get in the ring and march to the rope and do the wall yay over here, I'm fucking waiting for my second win, you know, today.
Right.
Well, I have since I finished with Vince. You know, to me, being a babyface with that gimmick is much harder than being what we were doing before. Maybe easier on the body, but it's harder job in the ring. You understand what I'm talking about?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
To keep that wind up and that energy level is not easy.
Yeah, because that energy level was, we tried to get the people. Now, I hate last night when you get into the ring, they play music, and then they stop, and then they announce the people.
Yeah.
You know, I liked it when the music starts, and then it tones down, and from New Zealand at 345 or 500 per pound, blah, 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 Bushwhacker Luke, and then the music and it comes on. The music starts, and then they do the announcement, and then I burst through the curtains to the ring. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And that, because the hit big face is always last. The bell rings, and I've got the people going to the ring. Yeah, and I got in the ring, and I whoa in the yay. The bell rings. You've already got the people there. When they come to the ring, and I get the people cheering, like last night, I was doing the whoa and the yay. Got the people cheering, and then fuck in this corner. That's fucking old. I try to tell promoters that. Oh no, this is the way we do it.
Right.
And I tell them, think in your head. Because they're so used to doing it that old way. What's your opinion? No, as a baby face.
I agree with what you're saying. the whole wrestling show today is presented as an event, right? It's not just wrestling matches.
Yeah.
And so to me, having like you're describing, with that music coming out, first of all, it seems far more professional. But secondly, it also condenses time, right? Because they play the whole music while you make the entrance. Now we have to make the announcements. And to me, it's like when you watch a pro football game, American football, right? It's 3 hours long, but the game itself is only an hour. And it takes 3 hours to get through it. The same thing with wrestling. I don't think wrestling fans want to see, here's Bushwhacker Luke, and here's the franchise, Shane Douglas. They want, as soon as that music stops, they want to see the action start.
Yes, that's right. And you're in the ring. Now, if you're a good baby face and you're over, the people are going to be up going to the ring.
Right.
Now you stop, and then you have to start again.
And they drop
now, I don't understand. And I tell promoters that. Yeah. I said, think.
But what would you possibly know after? I wanted to ask you this. I'll feed it into the question. What would you possibly know with 6 decades in the business?
7, mate.
7 decades.
You're right. Total this floor's hard. Take a body slam.
But I mean, that is amazing. Like Dominic did the same thing, and Luthez, I think, was 7 decades.
Now getting back, mate. Getting back to this: the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 2000. 2010, 2020.
Wow.
Now that, is that?
Yeah, you're a much better mathematician.
Yeah. Accountancy I did at school too. Accountancy.
Yeah.
Figures.
But that's amazing. And the thing is like when I watched your piece of your match last night, they're still fun matches to watch. It's not like, oh, here's a guy who's been in the business for 7 decades and it's going to be slow or whatever. It's still the same Bushwhacker match that I was watching in 1988 and entertaining. And the crowd, I've been trained to watch the audience. The audience smiles on their faces, the kids jumping up and down having fun, and that really is what we're there for, right? The match is important, but the more important than that is that the fan leaves feeling entertained.
The fan buys the tickets.
Yes.
We go out then so they come back another time to buy tickets again.
Right.
And if you don't involve the fans, this is what the kids today don't get. Do you hear me out there? They don't get. We have to get that fan base back in. Yep. Plus, they talk to their friends and say, I was at a match last night. Boy, I had a great time. Why don't you come with me next time?
Right.
That's how we build the crowds. Yep. And that, but they don't get it.
Yeah.
They do everything at the start, all the high finishes, everyone's finished move has a high spot at the start, and then at the end it goes down. Like they can't do any more except kill each other at the end, and then they don't get the people involved. People will cheer as they see the moves pop and pop and pop, but if you tell the story and build up to you're giving them all the small fireworks, and then in the end you give them the big fireworks.
The grand finale.
Yes.
Absolutely. I hear it with what you're saying right now. The same thing that most people from our generation says is, I watch these kids today, and I am blown away by how athletic they are. I mean, they seemingly defy gravity at times. But when you're watching it, for me anyway, I get 5, 6, 7 minutes into the match, and I'm bored when I see the next thing because it's all the same thing over and over again. And
they don't know who else is on the card, and they do the same moves. If a move's in on television that everyone's doing and they love it, now there's 7 matches. Say 4 matches do that fucking move over and over.
Yeah, and here you come in the main event, and they've already seen that.
Mate, I'm getting near the end of this bottle here. It's getting there. We must be getting near the end of this.
Yeah, we'll be ready to wrap up. Just a quick update on Butch. I ask you this all the time. We're in the dressing rooms. How's Butch doing? What's Butch up to right now?
I spoke to him 2 days ago. That's okay, McMahon. I said I'm into the bottle, and that's when we throw stuff away. Butch is doing good, mate. He's supposed to come over at 2:20. A independent promoter up north, had booked 28 shows for us in 2:20. And that was in 35 days, 28 shows around the country.
Right.
And all of a sudden, we're supposed to come over at WrestleMania. COVID hit.
Yeah.
So he moved it to the next year. COVID was still running wild in the country. That was 220, 221. COVID was still running wild.
And they're still trying to.
We're in 222 now. Now, New Zealand has only had about 48 deaths. Sunny and Island was 400 million. 4 million.
Right.
400 million. 100 million sheep. That's why all the boys have got a smile on their face. Those woolly girls are nice in the morning. Anyhow, and so this year, New Zealand is still in lockdown. Now, Australia opened up 2.5 months ago. New Zealand opened up a month ago. You know, they were in lockdown. You could get out of New Zealand, but you couldn't get back in. So Butch comes over here for 30 days, for 35 days, and then he has to sit around for